Funding for New Mexico in Focus is provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, acceptance, safety, and community. Why the Executive Director of Equality New Mexico says Pride is about so much more than just a parade, and an update on the state of LGBTQ struggles in the Southwest.
For me, first and foremost, Pride is a container for people to be their whole, true, authentic selves without fear.
And the longtime superintendent of Cuba Independent School District shares lessons from her career and thoughts on the work ahead for a more just education system. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm senior producer Lou DeVizio. Just like that, it's wildfire season in New Mexico again. This time, the target is fixed squarely over the southeastern part of the state. Residents in the Ruidoso area have evacuated as the South Fork and Salt fires burn and turn deadly. We'll share some images and more details at the bottom of tonight's show. Before that, we'll show you a conversation Hourland's Laura Paskus had with a doctor from Project ECHO back in February that's every bit as relevant now. Laura and Dr. Joanna Katzman talked about the growing prevalence and intensity of heat waves. That'll resonate with anyone who's been outside New Mexico in recent weeks. Laura and Dr. Katzman also zeroed in on a new training method that prepares medical professionals specifically to address the growing impacts of climate change. Also this week, correspondent Russell Contreras returns to the state's public education system, a beat he covered for the Albuquerque Journal 2 decades ago. Russell sits down with Dr. Karen Sanchez-Griego to reflect on her decades as an advocate for education reform and as the superintendent of the Cuba New Mexico Independent School District, and to get a sense of what Dr. Sanchez-Griego would prescribe to ensure all New Mexico students get a quality education. But we begin tonight with Pride Month, the celebration of LGBTQ people each June. Albuquerque already held its annual Pride festivities earlier this month. Farther north, the Santa Fe Human Rights Alliance will put on its annual Pride on the Plaza event Saturday, June 29th. This week, executive producer Jeff Proctor interviews Marshall Martinez, the executive director of Equality New Mexico, about the significance of those celebrations, how to navigate the growing commercialization of Pride events, and the current state of LGBTQ rights here and across the country.
Marshall, thank you so much for joining me on New Mexico in Focus this week.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So it's Pride Month, and I want to get to that in just a moment, but I would like to start just a bit broader. We began a conversation with Kevin Bowen from the Santa Fe Human Rights Alliance last year with a question that I would like to start with you right now, with the caveat, of course, that we are in a very high stakes election year here in 2024. But where do things stand, both nationally and at the state level, in terms of LGBTQ plus rights?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to start at the national level, what we've been saying at EQ&M, what our partners across the country have been saying, is that this is the most politically dangerous time, arguably since the peak of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, right? And the parallel that I've drawn for folks there is that was a time when especially gay and bisexual men vilified publicly. People didn't want us to be out and around. People were scared, uninformed about the virus, were scared, right? And so it was the first time since the beginning of the modern LGBTQ rights movement where queer people were really forcibly pressured back into the closet, back into hiding. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now across the country, right? Bans on gender-affirming care for minors, and recently even some attempts to ban gender-affirming care for transgender adults, right? The Don't Say Gay laws, which is really an understatement for what those bills have done across the South, right? These, all of these sorts of things, banning drag shows in public, which is really a ban on transgender people existing in public spaces, right? And so we're in a space now at the national level where LGBTQ folks, queer and trans people and their families are feeling like they have to hide from the public. Not only is there a policy danger there, but whenever those policy conversations come up in community, it leads local people who already have harbored this fear or this frustration or this hatred or this anger to then react physically or violently, right?
The culture follows the policy often.
Yeah, absolutely. And occasionally the policy follows the culture, but typically it's the other way around, right? And so the result of that is that in states across the country and in communities, even in some of the safe harbor states, like New Mexico is, folks are really afraid to be out and proud, right? Which is one of the reasons I think pride is so important, and I know we're going to talk about that. New Mexico is very unique. We have continued now, we are rolling on to our second year of having the most policy legal protections in the country for LGBTQ people. We accomplished a lot of really great work in the 2023 legislative session. New Mexico actually has a history of being very progressive on LGBTQ issues. A lot of folks, I think, don't know that, but we were one of a handful of states that legislatively repealed sodomy laws in the 70s, right? We never criminalized HIV, those sorts of things. We built on that in 2023. And so in policy, on the books, New Mexico is one of the safest places in the country to be a queer or trans person.
There's an infrastructure question that we could spend a whole half an hour talking about in terms of like what the mandate that those policies created was. But I want to get to this year's legislative session, if I can. Shortly after the session, your organization released a statement that said, in part, that the end results of the session were a, quote, mixed bag for LGBTQ plus New Mexicans. So which items in the bag were good and which ones gave you some concern?
I think, to start with, we worked in coalition with a number of organizations, the Coalition of Sexual Assault Providers, Planned Parenthood, et cetera, to pass an affirmative consent law in New Mexico. It was 5 years of attempts to pass this bill. And this bill basically, what passed this last session, said, on college campuses, when an accusation of sexual misconduct comes up, affirmative consent is the standard by which you adjudicate that claim, and affirmative consent is the level to which you educate young people. That was a top priority for LGBTQ folks. We, gay and lesbian people experience sexual violence at roughly 40% of our population. Trans folks, 2 out of 3 transgender individuals will experience some form of sexual violence. And our thought process behind that is you cannot expect people to play by the rules if you haven't taught them what the rules are. So that was really big, really important, really crucial. I've told my own story of being a young queer person who didn't understand consent, didn't know what I was and wasn't expected or allowed to say or do as a young person. So a whole new generation of young LGBTQ people will at least have an even playing field and understand how they can negotiate consent around their sexuality. So it was really great. But the vast majority of the session we spent actually trying to defend ourselves against what I would say are highly political, not evidence-based criminal laws, right? New crimes. And a lot of folks have asked me, why is Equality New Mexico talking about the so-called criminal justice system, mass incarceration? And the reality is that our communities live in this, sense of polarity, right? When we are over-policed in communities, right? And so when there's a charge of domestic violence, LGBTQ people are significantly more likely to be arrested than our heterosexual counterparts. And at the same time, when in neighborhoods where there are a large number of queer folks, the suspicion of violent crime, the possibility of a robbery, et cetera, across the country experience much slower response rates. So we live in this sort of, in this weird polarity around criminal justice. But then the result is that because we have experienced systemic discrimination since our childhoods, we don't have access to good lawyers. We don't have support systems to help us through. And so we end up being over-prosecuted, over-convicted, and over-incarcerated, right? And so we said it was a mixed bag because we worked really hard to pass that affirmative consent law.
I want to pivot to one of the House races that you all really focused on during this last primary election, and that would be District 18, where Mariana Anaya won with 48% of the vote. Why were you so heavily focused in that district and on that race?
Yeah, I think first of all, the first thing that I would say is Representative Gail Chasey, who's been a personal friend, has been a champion for the LGBTQ community for a very long time, for the entirety that she had been in the legislature. A lot of folks don't know or don't remember, but when we passed our original non-discrimination law to protect queer and trans people in 2003, she was the sponsor of that bill, right? And she was leading the charge in the House at a time when the Democratic caucus was not, they were not at pride parades at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And she was the one saying, we're not going to take these steps backwards on LGBTQ issues. So first and foremost, holding on to that district for us meant saying to the statewide community, this is not a space where one individual was the champion. This is a space where this seat can demonstrate that we have a tradition of being progressive, and we need to continue that work across the board, right? So that was the first thing that was a priority. The second thing, and I've been totally honest about this, Mariana has been a member of the Equality New Mexico team for many years, right? She was a volunteer and donor and supporter of the organization before I came back on staff as the executive director. Throughout her career, she's been an openly queer woman of color, been really proud, and she was our actual lobbyist for the last 2.5, almost 3 years. And then the last thing that I'll say is that in a legislature of 112 people, we are always, very happy to have folks who are strong allies and good supporters. I tell people oftentimes my favorite legislators are the ones who say, we'll do whatever EQ&M thinks is important, just let us know. But it is really critical that somebody inside the caucus, somebody on the floor, somebody in committee is both thinking about the strategy for passing bills and the external public narrative, as well as just the nuance and technicality of understanding the process. And Mariana was the perfect champion for us in saying she's been a lobbyist, she knows the strategy, she works well with community organizations. She's a legislator that I can call and have a conversation with and say, this is the priority, and she'll say, let's work together to solve it. And so, it was the combination of all of those things that led us to prioritize that race.
The ultimate sort of natural fit, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely, it really is, and also it is, worth knowing that we had, a few years ago, we had 2 openly queer members of the House and 4 openly queer members of the Senate. Both of those numbers have dropped a little bit because of some retirements and some choices not to run, et cetera. And so we also just really thought it was critical that the House Democratic Caucus and House at large, when they think of LGBTQ people, they have a peer, one of them sitting on the floor with them to be that face for them.
Marshall, we've got some minutes left here. Let's get to Pride.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, we have seen an increase certainly in sort of branding and maybe even commercialization around the events themselves. It seems like sort of everybody wants a piece of this now. I wonder what your thoughts are or concerns might be around the idea of some co-opting and maybe even whitewashing of some of these events.
Yeah. We use the term rainbow capitalism, right? The folks who slap a rainbow sticker on their window or they turn their logo from blue and yellow to a rainbow color for Pride Month because they remember queer people exist in June. And then we don't hear from them at any other part of the year, right? And EQ&M, we have something we say all through May and June, which is we happen to be queer all year, so you could also contact us in November, right? And that is real. And there's a real concern to the big brands, the big corporations that sponsor all of the Pride festivals, that rush out there to make sure everybody knows, the folks who put rainbow merchandise on their shelves, et cetera. And on the one hand, that's critical. I was a young queer person in a rural southern New Mexican community who spent a good chunk of my childhood thinking I was the only person like me, right? And so when I think now about a 12 or 13-year-old queer kid who hasn't told anybody, doesn't know what's going on in their brain and what's wrong with them, seeing that on television, hearing about it on the radio, at least indicates to them there are other people like me, right? Maybe I do belong. And so that's a really important step forward. At the same time, Pride should be a celebration and a recommitment to the activism, to the Stonewall riots, to the work we've done as a community to reach liberation. And it's hard to do that when capitalism is the basis of the oppression that we faced in so many ways, right? And so, I still go to Pride festivals, and I'm happy to dance in the corporation named whatever pavilion and, all of those things. It takes money to have a good party. And I welcome the money from those folks to plan a big party, right? Because we deserve a big party. We deserve an opportunity to be ourselves and feel safe and, and authentic out in public on Central or at Balloon Fiesta Park or whatever. And I think that queer and trans folks are really good at having a nuanced lens to say, thank you for the support you gave to Pride. Thank you for making sure you put your money into this space. Thanks for putting the rainbow t-shirts out or putting the sticker up or whatever. and we expect you to do better the rest of the year. And that means really helping us to dismantle the system that has created the need for so much discrimination baked into an education system, a criminal legal system, a healthcare system, right? And so again, I mean, it is like a repeated line at Equality New Mexico, but it's a mixed bag for us. We want the support, the publicity, the socialization, the acceptance, the representation. Those are critical for young queer and trans people to grow up in a world seeing themselves embraced and represented, right? And those definitely are parts of a larger system that makes it so hard for us to see ourselves in liberation.
And you said the word struggle too, right? There's a balance, very much a balance between making sure that that remains at the bottom of what you're doing versus the other side. I want to get away from the events for just a moment and spend just a second talking about Pride from a deeper, more sort of values-based perspective. And I would just like to ask, what does Pride mean to you through that lens?
You know, the first thing I always say when people ask that, again, I grew up in a rural southern New Mexican community, and so I always go back to my first Pride Festival in Albuquerque. I'd rather say not say what year, because I don't like people to know how old I am. Sure. Pride for me was the first opportunity that I got to dress the way I wanted to be as visibly queer as I had wanted to be in my tiny town, and not spend the day looking over my shoulder or identifying an exit or trying to find a place to hide. And so for me, first and foremost, Pride is a container for people to be their whole, true, authentic selves without fear. And I think Pride represents what our struggle is for. We deserve to have the experience of Pride. I don't want to parade in the heat all summer long, but we deserve to have the experience of Pride all year long in whatever community we live in, right? And I think that the values that boils down to are values of bodily autonomy and being able to make decisions about my own body, both healthcare-wise, but also just how I walk through the world, how I present myself, right? Acceptance, not tolerance. We've stopped being okay with tolerance a long time ago. Like, I tolerate mosquitoes in the summer, right? But I don't accept them. And so, right, and I, in righteous anger, yell at them every day in my backyard. But I think the reality is, like, we deserve acceptance, we deserve the feeling of safety, and we deserve community. And to me, that's what Pride is, right? It's safety, it's community, it's a big family reunion. There are people I see at Pride festivals in Albuquerque every year. I'm looking forward to Santa Fe Pride, it's one of my favorites. And there are people that I only see at Santa Fe Pride. And when I see them, I have 45 minutes of amazing catch-up conversation, sitting in the grass on the plaza, just being reminded of how much love exists in our community, and that connection of, we may not talk all year long, but we know that we're a part of the same struggle, we're part of the same community, and we can connect with each other when we're in need. And I think that, to me, that's what Pride is.
Marshall, thank you so much for the chat. I appreciate you coming down today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and happy Pride.
Same to you.
I had been passionate about the climate crisis in New Mexico because of our growing problems with extreme drought and extreme heat. And after taking the Yale course, I realized what better venue than Project ECHO to really, share this knowledge with clinicians and public health providers who really don't get that education in medical school or nursing school.
Now we turn to the thorny issue of New Mexico's public education system. You'll get a long view on some of the seemingly intractable problems and some of what has worked through the years in this next segment, when correspondent Russell Contreras sits down with Dr. Karen Sanchez-Griego. The two spoke just days before Dr. Sanchez-Griego's official retirement as superintendent of the Cuba, New Mexico Independent School District. She had a long career as an administrator and an advocate and a champion for change. Russell asks about graduation rates and whether the public education department is still serving its purpose.
Dr. Karen Sanchez-Griego, thank you for joining us here on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you, Mr. Contreras, for the invite. I'm so honored.
I've known you for years when I was at the Albuquerque Journal, but before we get into your career here and your latest tenure at Cuba Schools, walk me through it. As an educator, you were instrumental in the expansion of Enlace in the 2000s. You guys launched a well-lauded anti-truancy program. Looking back there 20 years later, in your opinion, what worked at that time and what didn't work?
I think when the Kellogg Foundation funded this, right, and it was in 34 programs across 9 states. New Mexico was one of the largest because we did an overall statewide initiative. I think it was really looking at what is the promise of Latino children and communities, and the success was the communities, right? It was really grounded in their voice. It was grounded in their students' voice. It was grounded in really trying to look at the wealth of the culture and language of that community and what their kids could bring to the forefront. And I think realizing that they were not just trying to not have their kids go to school. You know, there have been lots of comments that had come out that, oh, they don't care about their kids. Hispanic parents don't care about their kids, just ridiculous things. And so when we kind of came together and kind of talked about it, and worked on it, right, we saw so many parents and communities come to the forefront. And from the legislature all the way down and all the way up to DC at the time. In fact, President Bush, second President Bush, recognized Enlaces, communities, for their family centers and their recognition working in schools with families and communities.
You were also right there when the state moved from the Department of Education to the Public Education Department under Governor Richardson. This was a very exciting time. We thought we were reforming education overall. Looking back now, there's an effort to bring back this old structure because people believe the Public Education Department's not working. What is your reaction to that we want to move back to this other model? By that time, you remember, it wasn't working. What is your reaction to that?
I think as educators we grapple, right? We're like, what is going to be the easiest thing to get us out whatever situation that we're in, right? I do remember when Governor Richardson was there and there was this big push to move to the secretary. And the reason that they were moving to that was because of politics, right? The political pressures that were being placed on who was getting hired as the Secretary of Education. Were they predominantly looking at students all across New Mexico? And I think the beginning impetus for this was really looking at how do we move to put a person in place that then does the work that is really instrumental for children. Not that the other secretary wasn't, but I thought it was a positive thing. You know, we were very excited about the fact that these things were going to happen. But then what we saw was there was a lot of politics that went on, right? It would be just like, I think with Richardson we saw a lot of his initiatives. He was a very beloved governor, right? So was and wasn't, but in education he was. I remember the times that he spent with children, not only in Lasse, but across the state, really talking to them, letting them do a lot of things. But he really pushed for Dr. Garcia to come in and take a look at how they were going to reform those efforts. But there was still political things that went on. I think now, and working as a superintendent, I think and retiring here soon, is really that we've kind of lost our way, right? And so we're trying to grapple. Let's move back to this old system because we can control it more. Or, you know, let's stay in this system because we control it more. We can control it more in a different way, right? When you have a Secretary of Education, you're really working through the governor's office. When you work with a Secretary of Education who is placed in by elected board members, then you're kind of working with a different set of politics. So it's still political. I think for me, it's really looking at what's the best thing for kids, and why aren't we looking at what's the best thing for kids, and how do we stop that?
Sure. And you and I would talk 20 years ago. New Mexico was ranked at the bottom of a number of benchmarks in education. This used to anger you. You used to be very upset about this. Flash forward 2 decades now. New Mexico's still ranked near the bottom of a number of benchmarks. We're looking at test scores, graduation rates. We're still at the bottom. What are we doing wrong?
You know, I think that we don't look at systems change. I mean, one of the big things that I learned when we had done the collaborative of Enlace, and we were doing work with the law school, the medical school, lots of different organizations, and we were looking at education as the pipeline, right? You start them early when they're born, you move them up to PK-12, you move them into the different areas that they want to be, and it was still venued in career and college preparation, and kids were able to choose, but the systems never change. And so even when I went to Cuba 6 years ago, systemically, they were running the school district the same as they had been in the 1980s, which we know does not work. And so the systemic change is what is needed in order to be able to reform education in New Mexico. It's not just, hey, we have a reading program, hey, we have a literacy program, hey, we have this, hey, we have that. It's really taking a look at where are we spending our money, What are we doing in terms of students? Are we honoring and looking at their culture and language? Yazi Martinez, in my opinion, has been an incredible push to support educational equality, because that's what we see in New Mexico. That's why our children are not doing well. We're not looking at equality, and our system continues to look at this. The first year, Russell, I'll tell you that the first year that I started as the superintendent in Cuba, and I'd been a superintendent on the Navajo Nation as well, and I was also in Arlington, Virginia, had been recruited, and I will tell you that Latinos in general, especially with doctorates, are recruited all over the nation, almost exceptionally without being in the state of New Mexico. But the first meeting I went to with 89 superintendents, number one, I looked around the room and I said, oh my God, we don't even reflect or look like the student population that we work in. And nothing necessarily, not to be cruel or rude about that, but I was asking myself why. If we did this work 30 years prior and now we're here and still we're not reflective, not one Native American, oh, that's not true. There was one Native American superintendent in Magdalena. But one of the things that we saw when we started talking about Yazi Martinez and some of the cultural issues or some of the issues that were ineffectively affecting children, right? Not looking at how we were going to do this, so how we're looking at test scores, the different ways of providing assessment. And what I heard from my colleagues is we don't have those children. And it was like, what? I almost felt like as a 1980 graduate, and so that makes me old, right, of Rio Grande High School, it made me think of how is this happening? The same thing that I heard in the high school, in my high school, with those that run our school districts 30-something years later. That was very, very frustrating. And so there were several times that I did have conversation out loud, but I felt like my colleagues in some cases didn't want to hear it.
You mentioned superintendents. The average superintendent here in New Mexico, their tenure is about 1.5 years. So it creates a lot of instability in our school districts. You bucked that trend. You were there in Cuba for 6 years or more. Why does that happen? Why can't we keep superintendents? Why is there instability at our districts where we can't even keep a superintendent longer than almost 2 years?
Well, I'm going to go back to the fact that you've got to look at the system, right? You've got to take a look. And again, those are political positions. I don't think people realize. And even when I was younger as a teacher and thought, oh, I'm going to get in because I'm going to be able to help change the system. And then what I saw was, oh, wait, is the system going to change me? In fact, I had when I was working at Albuquerque High School as an activities director, when my principal came to me one day, because kids would come and tell me things and we would be doing advocacy, and he said, you know what? He said, you're young, you're Latina, you're a woman, all of these factors that I think you look at in terms of how, how you're going to be progressive. But if you just stop talking about equity and other things, you're going to be able to ascend the ladder. And I thought, okay, so what you're teaching me is I need to be quiet about the issues that completely affect children and their families and how they're going to be able to work or be able to move in the world. But in order to do that, I have to be quiet. And yet that's not what you need. You need leaders who can come to the forefront that can speak on behalf of children, just like I did in Cuba the 6 years that I was there. I really felt like the Board of Education was very, very important because they had a long term of superintendents turning over, high school principals turning over, but most importantly, their superintendents. And when they called and asked me and we met and we talked about me being there, I said to them, this is going to take some hard work because reforming institutions and you're the boss, right? The board's the boss. You're elected from the community, the voice of the community come forward. And I said, when we jump in the deep end of the pool, which we're going to have to do when we start talking about racial instability, looking at data and the data doesn't show that we're doing the right thing for kids, and we have to make these very important decisions. You need to throw me a life jacket, a life jacket or the little circle. And they said, we will. And every year I would remind them, we're here and we're doing this, and this is where we are. And we really looked at data. We really looked at where the kids were at, and we went back out into the community. Something that Brenda Chavez and others in Enlace had taught me is you have to go back to the community to hear what they have to say. And because that community was 78% Native American Navajo Dene from 3 local communities, and 22% Hispanic, again with the 78%, a lot of them are a dual race.
On that note, when you've always been an advocate for Latinos and Hispano students, but when you got to Cuba, you noticed that there was a racial difference. Hispanos were in charge, and Native American students, particularly Navajo, were being marginalized. What did you find?
What I found was shocking, actually. what I found in the data that we looked at, so when we first got there, I was there helping them with high school redesign. And we come and we said, can we look at the data? Well, there wasn't a data set to look at. And I'm like, how can you not have a data set when you're really looking at where your kids are at and what you're going to do? 62% graduation rate at that time in 2018, 2019. We started pulling the data together and seeing what was happening. What we saw is that kids were being pushed out, specifically Native American kids, largely Native American boys. And when I say pushed out, I mean state laws were being used against them. Instead of helping them, they were being used against them. So they would tell me, I would be like, how come these kids are being dropped? Who's allowing you to drop these kids? Well, this is what we do. On the 10th way we drop them because of the state law on the 10 days. It's like, hold on, have we gone out to do a home visit? Have we visited their parents? Do we know what's going on?
So we're basically returning to the Enlace model.
Trying to figure out, because a lot of what was happening in Enlace was really grounded in looking at the beauty of the community. And so
did the graduation rate improve over time?
Yes, we've now currently are at 97% in this last year.
From 60 to 90.
62 to 97.
Wow.
Right. And we did a lot of that by really, really targeted work and really looking at what was going on. We, because of the fact that we had the majority of our boys, mostly Native American boys, but our Hispanic boys as well, we said we need to turn and look to men in our community and bring them in and have them start working with our boys and show them, right, that maybe absence of a father or absence of a mentor or something, that we can bring that back and we can show them the beauty in who they are.
In our last 90 seconds, you've made so many improvements. So why walk away now?
It's time. I think it's time for me to retire and do some other things. Education will always be a part of me, and I will still continue to fight and get out into the if you will, New Mexico and the other states to really, really combat the fact that we're not doing right by children. And we're the leaders. We're the ones that can make the changes because we're the ones that help with boards, control finances and policies, and be able to go to the legislature to ask for several initiatives that are important to children.
Dr. Karen Sanchez-Griego, thank you for joining us here on New Mexico in Focus, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Identity plays a big part in why it's so important to embrace your native culture, the different traditions, cultures throughout all over the world, because you're already at that point in your life as a young adult trying to find a sense of who you are, and I think knowing your roots, your language, your people, your community pushes you to move past that uncertainty.
New Mexico and much of the country is caught in the middle of a heat wave, a phenomenon that's becoming more frequent and more intense as the Earth's climate continues to change. For many of us, these intense weather events are inconvenient, but for those who work or live outside, heat waves can be dangerous, even deadly. As the prevalence of heat waves grows, what if we as a society made some structural changes to address those growing health risks? That's the thought process behind a project at the University of New Mexico's Health Sciences Center. Long before Zoom became a part of our lives, doctors at Project ECHO used virtual learning to expand knowledge and best practices among healthcare professionals around our state and the world. In 2021, they began a Climate ECHO program with web-based trainings on healthcare decarbonizing, climate justice, and health equity. In an interview originally aired in February, Our Land senior producer Laura Paskus sat down with Dr. Joanna Katzman. She's the director of Project ECHO's public health initiatives, and she talks about the importance of training healthcare professionals to recognize how climate change affects patient health and to how to find solace and community when it comes to dealing with their own climate anxiety.
Dr. Joanna Katzman, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura, for having me.
Thanks for being here. So your background is in chronic pain and opioid management. How did you become interested in climate change for healthcare professionals?
Right, Laura, that's a great question. People always ask me. You know, I have always been interested in public health, and I actually got my master's degree in public health before even going to medical school. And that was my plan, to be a public health practitioner. But I always knew I wanted to do something more in medicine. And after medical school, I then became interested in neurology and pain management. But for many years, for about a decade, my goal was to tie in public health education into medicine and neurology. And it was in the early 2000s when I met Dr. Aurora at Project Echo, and he said, join me in his hepatitis C Project Echo and learn what I'm doing. I'm training primary care clinicians all around the state of New Mexico and teaching them how they can take care of their patients with hepatitis C in this virtual platform. And I understood that he could train clinicians to take care of their patients without needing to come into the university. And I thought I could do this for chronic pain and opioid management. And then over the years, staying with Project Echo, in addition to directing the pain center at the university, I realized I could also branch out and do this for other public health crises, like first responder resiliency and border health. And then in 2020, I took a public health certificate at Yale University virtually. And after I took the 6-month course, I had been passionate about the climate crisis in New Mexico because of our growing problems with extreme drought and extreme heat. And after taking the Yale course, I realized what better venue than Project Echo to really, share this knowledge with clinicians and public health providers who really don't get that education in medical school or nursing school, than to teach this to them. So I ventured out and started this program.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that climate change is affecting people's physical and mental health in the Southwest?
Right. And so there's just so many areas that climate change is affecting their health. A couple that I can think of right off the top are so many heat-related effects. I can think of a case that was brought to our Climate Change and Human Health Echo, and we presented this case a couple of times. New Mexico has urban heat islands. Las Cruces and Albuquerque are frequently 5 and 7 degrees warmer Fahrenheit in the spring and summer months compared to our suburban and rural counties in New Mexico. And that means that people who live in these urban areas are more affected by extreme heat. And so if you're working in these cities, or if you're homeless, or if you're a vulnerable patient, someone who might have a substance use disorder, or if you don't have air conditioning, or if you're impoverished, you might be much more susceptible to extreme heat. And so a case I can think of that comes to top of mind is a postal worker, for instance, who might be out in the sun all day, let's say in Las Cruces, maybe from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They might be working, they might be walking during their shift. They might be walking several miles a day, maybe not having enough water with them. They might not be wearing a wide brim hat, so not having enough protective shade. And one case I remember is them coming home to their daughter who they live with, and they're confused, and they're not remembering kind of their day, where they are. Their daughter takes them to the emergency room, and they're actually having heat exhaustion and almost heat stroke. And when they get to the emergency room, the doctor checks them for their labs, worried about renal failure, puts them up immediately to intravenous fluids. And on our Climate Change Echo, this is one of the things we teach about, is that extreme heat can really put someone at risk for heat exhaustion, heat stroke. And so we educate on things like that, Laura. Yeah.
I remember from participating in the one of the webinars, the impacts that heat waves can have on people who have mental health challenges or on certain types of medications. What should New Mexico healthcare professionals be also watching out for when we have these long days and days, weeks of hot temperatures?
Right, right. It would be really nice if New Mexico could put out more public service announcements about the prolonged heat waves, prolonged impacts. Many patients who have depression, who have psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, are on dopaminergic medications that, along with combined extreme heat, there are interactions that can adversely affect the patient and cause them to have increased confusion and might cause them to have, because of the nature of the medications. Also, one thing we know, Laura, is that when the heat at night does not fall below a certain point, for instance, if it remains above 95 for a week or two at a time, and that temperature does not drop, for instance, if the temperature does not drop below 90 but it stays high, there's increased irritability in someone who doesn't normally get anxious or irritable or kind of argumentative. We also know that violence in the community increases in the summer months, and heat certainly exacerbates this. This has been studied over and over again in many kind of peer-reviewed journals. So it's the falling of the temperature at night that is really protective. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious if there are things that healthcare professionals have been learning through this training that might apply to someone like me or our audience members. Like, how do we battle that fear about climate change? How do we battle that fear and hopelessness?
Right. So this is, I continually learn from the experts that come on the Climate Echo. I feel, Laura, like a novice myself. I feel like I have so much to learn, but what I have learned from the experts that have come on to the Climate Change and Human Health Echo is that we need to balance the gravity of the situation, and what I think is so hard for so many people who are still not bought into the data of the climate situation is that, yes, the facts are true, the science does hold up, is that there is hope, that we have a lot of hope, and there's a lot of things we can do as an individual and as a collective, and as a collective. And as a community, there are so many things we can do together. There are so many nature-based solutions to reduce our carbon footprint. The growing of trees has never been greater in the United States and in the Americas, for instance. There are so many nature-based solutions, whether it is growing food locally, sourcing your food locally, growing trees. The White House has put out most recently new incentives for healthcare organizations all around the country and incentives to decrease their carbon footprint. For instance, out of all the carbon emissions in the country, hospitals emit 7 to 10% of carbon emissions. So as healthcare providers, we can help to push on our administrators and CEOs to work on things to decrease the carbon footprint. Joining organizations like the Medical Society Consortium for Climate Change and becoming a community and feeling less isolated can provide us hope. Maybe biking to work just one day a week, or taking public transportation, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciated kind of zooming in to the Project Echo, and it was yet another reminder for me that whether you believe the data or whether you are actively paying attention to climate change, like climate change is having an incredible number of impacts on our daily lives. And so thank you for a really amazing series, and I hope that all the healthcare professionals who've been participating are really appreciating it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Laura, for everything you're doing to really showcase the environment.
Thank you.
Thanks to Laura and Dr. Joanna Katzman for that interview. Organizers of a traditional indigenous competition are touring the country, hoping to introduce athletes from other tribal nations to a unique set of events developed for generations by Alaskan Native people. The Native Youth Olympics is held each year, allowing young athletes to compete and develop abilities through competitions originally designed to help advance the strength and skill needed to survive daily life. The head of the program at Juneau, Alaska schools brought a team of 6 athletes here to New Mexico this spring. They stopped at Santa Clara Pueblo Tribal School, the Santa Fe Indian School, and the Institute of American Indian Art to teach some of the traditional events. Correspondent Antonia Gonzalez was at their competition for Koahnic Broadcasting this year in Anchorage, and as she shows us, the event encourages young people to strive for their personal best while keeping in touch with tradition.
We know that learning these games are healthy for us. They're healthy for our body, our mind, and our souls, and it really allows us to be happy, healthy, thriving people when we are enriched and with our identity of where we come from. So that's why it's so important to do these games, learn about them, teach them, and continue the legacy of the Native Youth Olympics.
Athletes grades 7th through 12th from across Alaska tested their skills in 11 different competitions, like the scissor broad jump, Eskimo stick pull, and one-hand reach.
This is a completely unique sport, right? You see totally awkward positions, like the one-hand reach, like what the heck, right? They're doing this crazy yoga pose, trying to reach up and touch this ball, like where do these come from? And we have to remember that our ancestors lived in a time where our conditions were harsh. We had harsh living conditions. Ice could break up in a matter of seconds, and you and your body had to be able to take you out of those dangerous situations. And so really the development of these games were just to allow us to keep our bodies ready for that environment. And in the wintertime, you know, you were kind of, especially if it's storming, you're just kind of hanging out in the kajgik in our traditional homes, and those are small spaces. And so playing these games not only kept our spirits up, but also allowed us to keep our bodies nice and fit for hunting and survival.
The Native Youth Olympics are like one big family to many of the participants. Some are new to the games, while others have been involved their entire life.
I grew up around these games. There's pictures of my mom pregnant with me competing. So since before I was born, I've been here with the games. I really like kneel jump. I don't know what it is. It's one of those ones that I think a lot of people look over, but when it's just cool to see, you know, people jumping, 40, 50 inches, even I think in the 60s. And it's always one of the ones that's played in the morning and there's not a lot of spectators. I also really like one-hand reach because it takes a lot of discipline and practice and just self-control. Those two are probably my favorite.
The games teach pain tolerance, agility, balance, concentration. There are also friendly competitions where athletes can be seen coaching each other, cheering one another on, and girls and boys compete at the same time.
I think it's really beneficial to just the community of the games to have the young athletes interacting with each other, teaching each other respect and compassion. I think a lot of the times the guys are kind of like, the girls are kind of, pushed to the side, and people pay attention to the guys more. And when they're in this environment where the guys are competing right alongside with the girls, I think it gives the girls more opportunity to be like, look at us, look what we're doing. It also gives the athletes, the male athletes and the female athletes, a chance to coach each other while they're competing.
About 450 athletes from 57 teams from across the state participated in the 2024 Games.
Toe kick, it's like you jump, you kick the stick back, and then land. You gotta keep the feet together, make sure they're aligned with the stick. I practiced in the gym like this and just kept kicking, kept measuring, kicking. The people are really supportive, always helpful. I like when the claps go. I like that.
Among those cheering on the athletes are the coaches.
Well, I've been coaching since 2013, so 11 years. And then I started competing when I was in 7th grade, so involved with the games for about 15 years. And I mainly competed in the strength events, so Indian stick pull, Eskimo stick pull, that was my thing. So we practice Monday through Thursday from, I get there at 4 and I go to till 6, but they get there before I do. But we usually go throughout the whole school year. That's how much time we put in with these kids.
After our season ends, after our regional event in Anchorage, the traditional games event, we focus on state practices where we look through our Juneau athletes to see where they placed at traditional games, and that's how we pick our students. And we do an extra hour-long practice, and we do it for 2 weeks straight. Whereas for like a regular season, we only meet twice a week for half an hour.
The games share Alaska Native culture. Both Native and non-Native students can learn and compete. They're also helping some reconnect with their Native roots.
I come from a small community in Bethel where the Yupik people are from. And so I currently reside in Juneau, which is a different culture from Yupik. So it's Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. And I think it's very important because, there have been many years where even though I wasn't there to experience it in person, you feel it so it's the trauma is passed down generation through generation. And so my upbringing was pretty touchy in terms of culture and like identity. Identity plays a big part in why it's so important to embrace your Native culture, the different traditions, cultures throughout all over the world, because you're already at that point in your life as a young adult trying to find a sense of who you are, and I think knowing your roots, your language, your people, your community, pushes you to move past that uncertainty.
Former high school players often continue to practice and play the games and take part in the Native Youth Olympics as volunteers and officials.
I like learning about basically what everyone has been doing for me for so long. I'm like, man, this is a lot of work. I'm really grateful for this. And so I like to be able to put in some time as well, I feel like it's kind of give back a little bit. It's just really fun. I've been practicing with some of the athletes at the community practice. I would say the hard work of everyone.
As the games continue in the future, there's a lot to look forward to.
I hope that NYO is in every community. I hope that each community can learn how to have their own games in their communities and be able for them to have those resources to support their youth who are interested, who maybe don't have a team or a coach. So I hope that NYO is everywhere across the state, not only in the state, but across lower 48 and I mean the globe. I hope NYO expands all over. It's addictive.
Traditional games will always live on. It's been revitalized. We have it. It's here. It's deeply rooted in our communities, which is something that maybe 2 generations ago wasn't able to say. So, we did it in that way where we were able to revitalize it. And so my hope is to continue that path and also to grow to other places that may not traditionally have had these types of games, because these games really are for the betterment of our community, right? For us to be thriving together as Indigenous people. And so really that's the hope, is that we can just get it through all of the communities. People feel empowered to play these traditional games and continue that.
In Anchorage, I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
Thanks to Antonia Gonzalez and to Koahnic Broadcasting Corporation for sharing that piece. Now we end tonight with an urgent request from Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham and members of New Mexico's congressional delegation for federal aid to help fight a pair of growing wildfires in southeastern New Mexico. Evacuation orders are in place for the village of Ruidoso, Ruidoso Downs, and the Mescalero Apache Nation, as the South Fork fire has scorched more than 16,000 acres and the Salt Fire had passed 7,000 acres as of Wednesday night. Both fires sat at 0% containment. At least 2 people have died and more than 1,400 structures have been damaged or completely lost, including 500 homes. Source New Mexico's Daniel Prokop reports hundreds more firefighters are on the way to the Ruidoso area, and search and rescue teams were set to be dispatched today as we record this on Thursday. That's after rain and flooding forced crews to pull back Wednesday evening. Representative Melanie Stansbury says that she expects President Biden to sign a federal emergency declaration by Friday to bring in more aid and money. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus is provided by viewers like you.